Hi everyone, this is Amanda at Amanda's Booktopia. If you're new here, welcome, and if not, welcome back. And today I'm going to go over the very few books I read in November, tell you all my thoughts. I did not read very much in November. It was a very, how do I describe this? A month of me not wanting to read nearly as much. There was a couple of decent reads and a lot of not so good reads. So, unfortunately, since I didn't really read a lot, this would be a very short video. Technically, I read 5 and DNF'd 1. Well, there's one that I started in October that I finished in November. That was my DNF, technically, because I carried it into November with me. So technically there's 6, but one of them, except for one, was a DNF. So we'll go over the DNF real quick. And that is, Lulu's Cafe by T.I. Lowe. I really wanted to like this book because Laura from Days of the Doyles really enjoyed this one, and she picked this one for my October TBR originally. And I started it in October, but I didn't finish it in October. So I carried it into November with me, and the beginning really captured my interest. Then as she starts to settle into the town, I felt like the big climax already happened and that there was really nothing left to go off of. I know technically it's supposed to be a story of moving on with your life and trying to find your place in the world, so to speak. So I understand that, but I felt like it was the end of the book for me. I felt like the beginning was the end. And I just wasn't vibing with the rest of it. So unfortunately I had a DNF. I tried the audiobook and I liked the narrator. The beginning was very emotional. It's just eventually I couldn't continue. It just didn't feel like it was the right kind of storyline for me, if that makes any sense. I mean, I'm all for trying to move on with your life and trying to move on to bigger and better things, create a new identity for yourself, so to speak. And I understand all that. It's just, I wasn't vibing. I wasn't feeling it. I wasn't really into it. So unfortunately, I know this book will work for some people, just wasn't the right book for me. So it was a little bit unfortunate. But at least I tried. That's the most important part. Now let's backtrack a little bit. We're going to go back to the beginning of November because Lulu's Cafe took me to November 11th. So we're going to backtrack to the beginning of that month. And I want to talk about The Boyfriend by Frida McFadden. I read this book because my sister joined her own book club. And this book, The Boyfriend by Frida McFadden, was the book her book club was reading. And she wanted me to read it first before she got into it. So I read it first, and I did a whole book review video on this book just for her on my channel. So if you want to hear more in-depth thoughts, please go check out that video because I dedicated that whole thing to my sister. And I really enjoyed the book. It really had my interest all the way through. The ending threw me for a loop for the most part. There was only one thing I predicted in the end. The rest completely blew my mind. It was a very interesting ending. And there's a slight open ending, and I'm not a fan of open endings. Which is why this was a 4-star, not a 5-star. It would have been a 5-star if it wasn't for that darn open ending. What is with book and open endings? I swear. Can we not do open endings anymore, people? I want these wrapped up in a nice little bow. At least satisfy me. Don't make me wonder. I don't like that. But that was the only reason why I gave it a 4-star and it wasn't a 5-star. But I really enjoyed the book and I had a great time with it. Frida McFadden is a go-to thriller author for me. I still have more books by her that I have not yet read. But the ones that I have read from her, I mostly really enjoyed except for one, which was the last book in the Housemaid series. The Housemaid is watching. That one was my least favorite out of all the ones I've read from her so far. I'm very excited that The Housemaid by her is being made into a movie. I cannot wait to see how that goes. I'm excited they're having Amanda Seyfried in it because I really enjoy Amanda Seyfried and a couple of different movies that I've seen from her. So I'm excited to see how that goes. And I will leave my book review video linked down below for The Boyfriend if you want to hear all my in-depth thoughts. And then the next book I read was for the Sweeney Readers Romance Book Club. We read Falling in Love, in as in I-N-N, by Erin Branscombe. And it was a cute, fairly quick audiobook for me. It wasn't a very long audiobook. I think it was like just over 6 hours or something like that. And it was cute. I had a good time with it. There was a couple things here and there made me question. But overall, it was just a cute read. Had a decent time with it. It wasn't anything to write home about for me. Like, it wasn't a huge hit, but it wasn't terrible. So for that reason is why I gave it a 3-star rating. It was just middle of the road for me. And that's all I have for that book. I don't really have much to talk about on that. But the next book I read was for the Thrills and Chills book club. That was The Quarry Girls by Jess Lowry. Now, the synopsis on this one had me really intrigued. And going into it, I really enjoyed the setup and the time period that it was in. That it took place in the 1970s. Which I thought was really interesting. Because you don't get a lot of thrillers in the 70s. So I was interested to see how this one went. I really hyped this book up in my head. And it felt kind of flat for me. It was real interesting at first. And then it just went like, it just crashed and burned for me, unfortunately. I did not like how the men treated the women. I did not like the ending. I did not like lots of things in this book. I think I was the only one. I think I was the only person in the discussion of this book that was in the minority on my rating on this one. I gave it 2 stars. Everyone else seemed to really enjoy this book. I was the only one that wasn't crazy about it. It seems like to me. Like, I was very unhappy about the ending. And other parts in this book just bothered me. And so, in the way the father treated his daughters, that is not how you treat your kids. I'm sorry. They had no real parent in their lives. And I felt like the main character was a mother to her sister. Because of stuff that was going on in the book. I don't want to give too much away for those who want to read it. If you're curious, sure, go ahead, give it a look it up, see what give it a try, see what you think. Unfortunately for me, I just had a really, really hard time with this book. It started out promising, and it just did not work out for me. I was so disappointed. So yeah, unfortunately, it was a 2-star. But enough talk about that. Let's move on to the next one. And the next book I had was Heart of Night and Fire by Nisha J. Tooley. This was the book club pick for Fiction Falls. Clint and I, my bestie Clint, and I, we run this book club together. And this was our pick for the month of November because I really enjoy her other series that just finished with, that she just wrapped up recently with a Trial of the Sun Queen and Artifacts of Moranos and how that series goes. I've really enjoyed that series. So I wanted to try her backlist. So this was a perfect opportunity to try something else from this author. And I had a pretty decent time with it. I originally gave it 4 stars. And then after our book discussion, I lowered it to a 3. Because even though I had a good time with it, there were parts that ended up being kind of confusing. It wasn't explained very well. But I'm hoping as the series continues, those questions will be answered. And I do want to continue the series. I want to see where it goes. It's not a priority for me right now, but eventually I want to try and finish out the series and see how, if in the rest of the books, if things, like, if more things are answered. Because there was a little bit of confusion in that first book. And I thought it was supposed to be a romance. I wasn't quite feeling the romance. And it just felt completely out of place, which is why this was a 3-star. It just kind of got thrown in for romance sake, if that makes any sense. I felt like it could have been done without a romance, because if the fantasy world is very interesting. And I loved how this is Indian inspired. And I very much had a good time with that. But I definitely want to see what happens with the rest of the series. So I will at some point continue, because I'm definitely interested to see what happens in the next book. And then the last book I read in November is Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. I ended up buddy reading this with Alita from Alita in the Books, I think her name is. I will link her down below if you want to check out her channel. We decided we were both reading it in the month of November. She asked me if I wanted to buddy read it, so I said sure. So I listened to the audio in this one, and it was about this woman who in the 1950s, like, women were not granted the same courtesies as men do. And so women have a really hard time with keeping jobs, like, going to college. Just because they're smart doesn't mean they should waste their talents behind a desk. And really standing up for yourself as women. So it's a very character forward book. And I really enjoyed that part. There were parts that really frustrated me in this book, but it wasn't because of the book was bad by any means. It was more because of the way women were treated in that time period. And that's what frustrated me. But the way the book went, you got to see her progression, the main character, as she finally sticks up for herself. And this is not spoiling anything, because we already know the book is about that she ends up on this TV show. And she's trying to teach people basically how to cook using chemistry. So it was very fascinating, that part of the book. That part, I think, interested me the most. I had a pretty good time with it eventually. I was just frustrated with the men in the story because of how men treated women in that time period. That was the only thing that bothered me out of the whole book. But I had a pretty decent time with this book. So it wasn't a favorite by any means. Like, oh my gosh, it was the best book ever. But I had a good time. So it was definitely a 4-star. And I heard she's writing a new book. So I definitely be interested in reading her new book when it comes out. I think it's going to be another historical fiction. And I love historical fiction. So I will definitely give her a new book a shot when it comes out. And that is all the books I have in this November wrap-up. I know it's kind of short, but I did not do a lot of reading, unfortunately, in the month of November. I'm hoping December will be better. As I'm filming this, I've already read a couple of books in December, which is better than how my November started. So we will see how this month goes, and I will let you guys know how my December books turned out. So thank you for stopping by and listening to me rant and rave about all these books. If you don't feel like being chatty, give me a fire emoji for Heart of Night and Fire, because I had a good time. And if you stuck around this long, I'm hoping you enjoyed me enough to give me a big like. And if you want to see more videos from me, make sure you smash the subscribe button down below, and I will see you on the next one.